Was it mistaken identity or Sydney's latest underworld execution? That's what police said tonight, trying to understand after a young plumber was gunned down outside his family home.
A young plumber's life was tragically cut short outside his own home in Condell Park. John Versace, just 23 years old, was gunned down in what shocked a quiet suburban community. Known by family and friends as a kind and hardworking young man, John's death raises painful questions. Was this a targeted attack or a terrible case of mistaken identity? As police scramble for answers and the community mourns, the story of John Versace shines a harsh light on the dangers lurking even in peaceful neighborhoods. Today we dive into what happened that day, the investigation that followed, and the impact this tragedy has had on those left behind. Condell Park is usually one of those quiet spots where life moves at a gentle pace. People know their neighbors, kids play in the streets, and days tend to blend into each other without much drama. But that peaceful rhythm was shattered on one afternoon in May 2025 when John Versace, a 23-year-old plumber, was gunned down right outside his own family home. The kind of place you'd expect to feel safe suddenly became the scene of a violent crime that left the whole community reeling. It all happened fast. John was outside, going about his day, when gunfire suddenly broke the silence. Neighbors remember hearing sharp pops, gunshots, that echoed down the street, sending a shock through everyone nearby. Some thought it was fireworks at first, until the truth became impossible to ignore. John collapsed on the driveway after being hit. There was no warning, no time to react. Just moments of chaos and confusion. Emergency services were called immediately, but despite their quick arrival, John didn't make it. The paramedics did everything they could, but the wounds were fatal. Police set up a cordon around the house, blocking off the street as the investigation kicked off. Residents stood at the edges, shaken, asking themselves how something so terrible could happen in their quiet suburb. The family was left devastated. John was more than just a plumber. He was a son, a brother, a friend. Described by those who knew him as hardworking and genuine, his sudden death left a hole that no words could fill. People who knew him well say he had a bright future ahead, with plans and dreams that now would never come true. What made this shooting so chilling was the apparent randomness of it. At first, no one knew why John had been targeted, or if he was even the intended victim. Police said the investigation was looking into every angle, whether it was a deliberate attack or a case of mistaken identity. And that question hung over the neighborhood like a dark cloud. Why John? Why here? Adding to the mystery was the fact that the getaway was unusual. Witnesses saw a vehicle burning nearby, and police quickly linked it to the shooting. The car was found torched just a few streets away, a clear sign the attackers wanted to destroy evidence and disappear fast. But the burnt-out car only added to the puzzle. Who were these people, and what were they trying to hide? Local residents were left uneasy, some wondering if this was the start of something bigger or just a one-off tragedy. Rumors swirled. Was it linked to gang violence, a personal feud, or something else entirely? The police were tight-lipped, not wanting to jump to conclusions, but the community's sense of security was badly shaken. It wasn't just about John's death. It was about what it meant for the whole area. Condell Park isn't known for violence, and many hoped it would stay that way. But this incident forced everyone to confront a harsh reality. Sometimes, danger can strike where you least expect it. As the police dug deeper, the story began to unfold in unexpected ways. Neighbors spoke of hearing strange noises before the shooting, cars coming and going at odd hours, and a growing sense that something was off. Some wondered if John had unknowingly got caught up in something bigger than himself. Despite the grief, there was a strong sense of community. People rallied around John's family, offering support and trying to make sense of the senseless. Candlelight vigils, messages of solidarity, and shared memories all showed how deeply he was loved. His death became a wake-up call, a reminder to look out for one another and to stand against violence wherever it appears. In the days that followed, the police worked tirelessly. Every lead mattered, every detail was important. From the burnt car to the shells found at the scene, the pieces slowly started coming together. But even with all the effort, many questions remained unanswered. Who pulled the trigger? What was their motive? And would justice be served? This tragic event was more than just a crime. It was a story about a young life cut short, a community changed forever, and the search for answers that might never fully come. John Versace's shooting was a harsh reminder that sometimes the quietest streets can hold the darkest secrets. As the shock of John Versace's shooting settled over Condell Park, the police wasted no time diving headfirst into what quickly became a complex and intense investigation. The scene itself was chaotic, evidence scattered, a burnt-out getaway car, and a community desperate for answers. From the very start, detectives knew this wouldn't be a straightforward case. The question on everyone's mind: who did this and why? Detectives worked around the clock, canvassing neighbors, collecting CCTV footage, and following every lead, no matter how small. Thankfully, the area around John's home had decent surveillance coverage, and cameras captured some crucial moments around the time of the shooting. The footage showed suspicious vehicles moving in and out, helping police piece together the timeline. But there was still the big mystery: the motive. One theory early on was that John might have been the target of gang-related violence. While he wasn't known to have any criminal connections, Sydney's West has had its share of turf wars and rivalries. Police had to consider whether this was a case of mistaken identity, or if John had unwittingly crossed paths with dangerous people. The investigation dug into his background, searching for any links that could explain the violence. Meanwhile, forensics teams worked meticulously at the scene, gathering shell casings and other physical evidence. Ballistics experts matched the bullets to the weapon used, trying to trace where it came from, and if it connected to other crimes. The burnt-out car was examined too, a key piece of the puzzle. Destroying evidence by torching a vehicle is a classic move in serious crimes, but it also leaves behind clues like fingerprints, tire tracks, and paint chips. The police hoped these small details would lead them closer to the shooters. Public appeals were made, asking anyone who saw or heard something that afternoon to come forward. The community's response was mixed. Some people were willing to talk, while others stayed silent, wary of getting involved. It's a tough balance when fear keeps people from helping, and police had to work hard to build trust. As days turned into weeks, the investigation started revealing more than just the surface story. Officers uncovered that, in the weeks before the shooting, John's family had been on edge. Neighbors reported seeing unfamiliar faces around the house, cars that didn't belong, and late-night visitors. These details suggested this wasn't random. Someone had been watching, maybe even planning. One of the more surprising developments came when police found out about a dispute involving a family member. It wasn't clear if this was connected, but it gave detectives a fresh direction. Personal conflicts can sometimes lead to violent outcomes, and every possible angle had to be explored. Throughout the investigation, John's family stood by, desperate for justice but struggling with grief. Their pain was visible in every interview they gave, yet they remained hopeful the police would catch the person responsible. Supporters from the community also stepped up, pushing for answers and offering help in any way they could. Technology played a huge role too. Police analyzed phone records, tracking calls and messages that might reveal planning or coordination between suspects. Digital footprints often don't lie, and this helped connect some dots that were otherwise invisible. Despite all the hard work, the case wasn't without its challenges. The suspects were careful, covering their tracks, and witnesses were hesitant. In cases like this, where fear and intimidation hang heavy, solving the crime can take time. But the police remained determined, knowing the clock was ticking. As the story unfolded behind closed doors, the community watched closely, eager for any news. They wanted to believe that justice was on the horizon, that the nightmare would end, and Condell Park could heal. But in the shadows, the case was far from over. Detectives knew that catching the shooters meant more than just arrests. It meant sending a clear message that violence won't be tolerated. It was a mission to restore safety, trust, and peace to a neighborhood that had been turned upside down. The investigation was a race against time, against fear, and against silence. Every new piece of evidence brought hope, but also raised more questions. Who were the masterminds behind the attack? Did they act alone, or were they part of something bigger? And most importantly, would they be brought to justice before they could strike again? This chapter of the story is about persistence, the grind of chasing leads, the frustration of dead ends, and the unwavering commitment to finding the truth. John Versace's case became a priority for Sydney's police, but also a reminder that even in the darkest moments, people won't stop fighting for justice. the shockwaves from John Versace's shooting didn't just rattle his family, they rippled through the whole Condell Park community. When news of a young local plumber being gunned down hit the streets, it stirred up fear, anger, and a mix of disbelief. How could something so brutal happen in a quiet suburban neighborhood? The sense of safety that many took for granted suddenly felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. Locals started looking over their shoulders, locking doors earlier than usual, and keeping an eye out for anything suspicious. Conversations at the shops, cafes, and parks inevitably turned to the shooting. People wondering if it was a one-off or if there were darker forces lurking just beneath the surface. Rumors swirled, some grounded in fact, others fueled by fear and speculation. That kind of atmosphere can change a place overnight. Community leaders and local politicians quickly stepped in, trying to calm nerves and reassure residents. Police presence increased around the neighborhood, with officers patrolling on foot and in cars, aiming to restore a sense of security. But no amount of patrols could fully erase the memory of what happened. A violent reminder that crime can touch any corner of a city. John's family became a symbol of the tragedy. Their heartbreak was raw and visible, shared widely in media coverage. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers offered support. Flowers left at the scene, vigils held in his memory. It wasn't just about mourning John. It was about standing together against violence, showing that the community wouldn't be broken. At the same time, the shooting sparked wider conversations about youth, crime, and safety in Sydney's West. This wasn't just an isolated incident, it was part of a larger problem. Communities like Condell Park often face challenges that go unnoticed by the rest of the city. Economic hardships, lack of opportunities, and sometimes a tough relationship with law enforcement. Groups began pushing for more resources, better youth programs, increased funding for local policing, and stronger community engagement initiatives. The hope was to tackle the root causes of violence, not just respond after the fact. It was clear that stopping tragedies like John's shooting required more than just catching the culprits. It meant building safer, stronger communities from the ground up. But change takes time, and for many residents, the wounds were still fresh. Schools noticed a shift too. Teachers reported students struggling with anxiety and fear, some of whom had known John personally. The shooting was a harsh lesson about how violence can impact not just individuals, but entire networks of people. Media coverage continued to shine a light on the investigation and the broader issues at play. Some stories focused on the gritty details of the police work, others on the human side, the grief, the resilience, and the desire for justice. Through it all, John's story reminded everyone that behind every headline is a real person, a family left to pick up the pieces. The community's response showed remarkable strength. Local residents organized neighborhood watches, started dialogue groups, and worked with police to create safer spaces. It was a collective effort, a refusal to let fear define their home. Still, the questions lingered. Who was responsible? Would justice be served? And how many more lives could be saved by learning from this tragedy? John Versace's death became a catalyst, pushing Condell Park to confront uncomfortable truths, while also inspiring hope for a better future. It's a reminder that even in the face of darkness, people can come together to heal, protect, and rebuild. Right after the shooting, the pressure was on the police to find answers, and fast. A young man was dead in broad daylight, right outside his own home, and the whole community was watching. No one wanted to be left in the dark about what happened or why. Detectives from the New South Wales Police quickly jumped into action. The first step was to piece together the timeline, and they had some key leads from CCTV footage that was captured around the time of the shooting. The grainy video showed a figure moving near John's house just before the shots rang out. Though it wasn't a crystal clear picture, it was enough to start building a profile of the suspect. The footage also showed the getaway vehicle, a critical clue that gave investigators a direction to follow. Witnesses from the neighborhood came forward, some with shaky memories, others with clear observations. People recalled hearing gunshots, seeing someone run, or spotting a suspicious car. Collecting these pieces helped form a fuller picture of the event. But as always with cases like this, there were challenges. Witnesses were scared to talk, and some were reluctant to get involved, worried about possible retaliation. That fear is a big hurdle for police trying to crack serious crimes, especially when it comes to gang-related violence or organized crime. Meanwhile, forensic teams were combing the scene for any physical evidence, shell casings, fingerprints, anything that might lead to the shooter. They also examined the vehicle left behind, hoping to find traces of the culprit. Every small detail mattered because in a case like this, the smallest piece can break the whole thing wide open. Police worked around the clock, interviewing people connected to John, his family, friends, colleagues, trying to understand if there was a motive. Was this a random act of violence? Or was John caught up in something bigger? As details emerged, it became clear that this wasn't a random shooting. There were whispers of disputes, possible rivalries, and personal grudges. But nothing was concrete yet. The investigation also uncovered some chilling facts. John was known as a hardworking young plumber with a solid reputation. This wasn't someone with a criminal past, which made the shooting even more shocking. Why would someone want to target him? Was it a case of mistaken identity? Or had he become an unintended victim of someone else's conflict? Detectives kept pushing, following leads that took them into the darker corners of Sydney's underbelly. They dug into local gang activity, drug networks, and previous incidents of violence in the area. It was like peeling back layers, revealing a complicated web of tension and danger that sometimes spills over into ordinary lives. At the same time, the police knew the clock was ticking. The longer a case drags on, the colder it gets. Memories fade, evidence can get lost, and suspects might slip away. They needed a breakthrough, and fast. That breakthrough came when someone from the community finally stepped up, a witness who had previously been silent. Their information gave police a solid lead, enough to start connecting the dots and narrowing down suspects. From there, detectives moved quickly, putting together surveillance, phone records, and other intelligence. But even with progress, the investigation wasn't straightforward. There were dead ends, false leads, and moments where it felt like the case might go cold. Still, the police stayed relentless, motivated by the promise of justice for John and his family. Behind the scenes, there were also negotiations happening, deals made with informants, strategies to protect witnesses, and efforts to prevent further violence in the community. Every move was a careful balancing act, trying to bring criminals to account without sparking more danger. In the end, the investigation highlighted not just the facts of the shooting, but the bigger picture of crime, fear, and resilience in Condell Park. It showed how a single tragic event can shine a light on wider issues and push everyone, police, community, and government, to act. John's case became more than just a headline. It was a test of how far the system could go to find the truth, and how a community could stand firm even when shaken to its core. With leads in hand and the investigation heating up, the police were determined to bring John Versace's killer to justice. But as anyone who's followed real-life crime stories knows, it's rarely a straight road. The search for justice quickly revealed just how messy and complicated things could get, and how far the ripple effects of one violent act can spread. Right from the start, the community felt the weight of what had happened. John wasn't just another victim. He was a young guy with dreams and a future, cut down outside his own front door. His friends and family were desperate for answers, hoping that those responsible wouldn't just slip through the cracks. But at the same time, fear was everywhere. People didn't want to get involved, worried about what might happen if they spoke up. Police knew they had to tread carefully. They set up witness protection plans, tried to reassure the community, and worked hard to build trust. It wasn't easy. In Condell Park and similar neighborhoods, there's often a wall of silence when it comes to serious crimes. Breaking that barrier is crucial if justice is to be served. Detectives also began piecing together John's final days, looking for anything out of the ordinary. They checked phone records, CCTV footage, social media posts, even his workplace contacts. Every small detail mattered. Was there an argument? Did John have enemies? Or was he caught in the crossfire of someone else's feud? The more they dug, the more it became clear that this shooting was no accident. There were layers of conflict hidden beneath the surface. Meanwhile, the police started closing in on suspects. They identified a few individuals believed to be involved, some with connections to local gangs and known criminal activities. Arrests were made, and with each one, the case moved a step closer to court. But suspects rarely go quietly. and the threat of retaliation loomed large, making the situation even more tense. Court proceedings are always intense, but when a young man's life is at the center of it, the stakes feel even higher. John's family had to relive the nightmare over and over, sitting through hearings that dragged on for months. The defense lawyers worked hard to challenge the evidence, while the prosecution pushed to keep the focus on the truth behind the killing. Throughout the trial, the community watched closely, hoping for closure. News reports covered every twist and turn, reminding everyone of the tragedy and the ongoing battle for justice. It was a stark reminder of how crime doesn't just end with an arrest. It's a long, difficult process that affects so many lives. One of the hardest parts was dealing with the gaps in evidence. Some witnesses changed their stories or refused to testify, sometimes out of fear or pressure. That made the police job harder and the path to a verdict more uncertain. But in the end, the combined efforts of investigators, prosecutors, and brave witnesses started to pay off. Verdicts were reached and sentences handed down. But even with justice served in the courtroom, the scars of that day remain. For John's family, friends, and the wider community, healing takes time, and the shadow of violence lingers long after the headlines fade. John's death sparked conversations beyond just the crime itself. It brought up tough questions about safety, about the support systems in place for young people, and about how communities can better protect themselves from this kind of senseless violence. It also shone a light on the challenges police face in tackling organized crime and gang-related shootings. In the years since, there have been efforts to improve community policing, outreach programs, and youth engagement initiatives, all aimed at preventing another tragedy like this. But change takes time, and the road ahead is still uncertain. Through it all, John's story is a reminder of how fragile life can be, and how important it is to keep pushing for justice, no matter how difficult the path. It's about remembering the person behind the headlines, and standing up against the violence that tore a life apart. The trial ended, the sentences were handed down, and the headlines started to fade. But the story of John Versace is far from over. His family, friends, and the community are left with a hole that nothing can quite fill. Losing someone so young, so full of life, is a shock that echoes for years, and no court verdict can fully close that chapter. What remains is the memory of John, a hardworking young plumber with a bright future, taken far too soon. People who knew him remember his smile, his laugh, the everyday moments that made him who he was. Those memories have become a source of strength for those closest to him, a way to keep his spirit alive even when the pain feels raw. The tragedy also forced a hard look at the bigger picture. How do neighborhoods like Condell Park protect their young people? How can families feel safe in their own homes? And what can be done to stop violence before it starts? These are questions that don't have easy answers, but John's story pushed many to seek them. Local community groups have since been working harder, creating spaces for young people to connect, learn, and grow away from trouble. Police and social services have stepped up efforts to build trust and engage with residents, aiming to prevent future tragedies. It's a slow process, but every small step counts. John's death serves as a harsh reminder of the consequences when violence takes root, not just for the individuals involved, but for everyone around them. It shows the devastating impact on families and communities, and the importance of standing up together to demand change. While justice was served in the courtroom, the journey toward healing is ongoing. It's about more than punishment. It's about support, understanding, and creating an environment where young people don't feel trapped or hopeless. It's about breaking cycles of violence and giving new hope to the next generation. For John's family, every day is a challenge, but they've become voices for awareness and change. Their courage in sharing their story helps remind us all that behind every headline is a real person with dreams and loved ones who miss them deeply. In the end, John Versace's story isn't just about a senseless act of violence. It's about resilience, the strength of community, and the urgent need to protect the people we care about. It's a call to listen, to act, and to remember that every life matters. As we look back on the events that unfolded outside that home in Condell Park, it's clear this is more than just a crime story. It's a human story, one that urges us to reflect on how we can build safer, kinder communities where no young life is cut short. John's name may never leave the news pages, but it's his memory and the hope for a better future that will keep his legacy alive. Because at the end of the day, that's what truly matters. Not just the past, but how we move forward from it.